There are two famous guys named Steve McQueen. There's the Triumph Bonneville riding movie star Steve McQueen, and there's the British guy who directed 12 Years a Slave, Steve McQueen. Just wanted to clear up which one we're talking about beforehand. Thank you so much for checking out the review. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know when I post a new video. Solomon Northup was many things. He was from Saratoga Springs, New York. He was a farmer. He was a professional violinist. He was a father. He was a husband. He was black. He was also a free man. Born in either 1807 or 1808, Northup was the son of a freed slave and a free woman. In 1841, he was lured by an offer of work to New York City and then Washington, D.C. by two men claiming to be from a circus company. Solomon was then drugged and sold to a D.C. slave trader for $650. Slavery was legal in America's capital at the time, and the first shots of the Civil War wouldn't be fired at Fort Sumter for another 20 years. The movie was released to massive critical acclaim in 2013 and won multiple Academy Awards, including Best Picture. This film shows, often in very graphic detail, the very worst parts of the American slave trade. People are whipped beyond recognition, and families are torn apart while good men do nothing. Sexual violence is unfortunately rampant, and very real human beings are referred to as property and treated accordingly. Like this film, there are a fair number of other movies that I hesitate to recommend watching more than once. Schindler's List, The Road, American History X, United 93, Requiem for a Dream, Blue Valentine, The Last Jedi. Okay, that last one was a joke. I'm allowed to make one joke here, even if this is a serious movie review. So that was it. 12 Years a Slave is just as heartbreaking as any of those other movies, and in a similar fashion, pushes the bounds of filmmaking far beyond the sole purpose of entertaining the audience. This is a movie that is specifically crafted to show you the physical, spiritual, emotional, and psychological effects of slavery. From an effectiveness standpoint, this might be one of the most upsetting and difficult movies you will ever watch. I certainly know that was the case for me. We don't get these types of films often enough, but when we do, they have the ability to completely change how people see topics that aren't often shown in such visceral detail. Before we get well into the review, please know there will be some spoilers regarding the opening of the movie and some character details, but I'll do my best to avoid ruining any of the major plot points for you. The film starts off giving us a brief glimpse of Northup's life as a free man, follows him down to Louisiana as he deals with the pain of losing everything in his life, and then is slowly forced to learn how to survive circumstances that are now completely beyond his control. The small details that the film unveils during the beginning of the movie are crucial in how they allow us to see the world through Northup's eyes. One minute he's enjoying dinner with two men he believes to have good intentions, and the next he wakes up in a dingy cellar chained to a wall. I don't know how long it took for the real Solomon to understand what exactly was happening to him, but we see it play out in real time, and it's devastating. Solomon attempts to explain his plight to his captor and is immediately beaten into submission for even broaching the subject. After he's bloodied up, they won't even let him keep the shirt off his back. It's at this point in the movie that McQueen is telling us, in no uncertain terms, that Solomon Northup is no longer free. He's now shipped down to New Orleans, where he is greeted by a slave trader named Theophilus Freeman. Yes, the slave trader's name is Freeman. Ironic, given that he makes a living selling people to other people. Paul Giamatti plays the sleazy businessman who is adept at his job, even if that job includes separating kids from their mothers. In a scene that hit me extremely hard, Freeman does exactly that. The rest of the movie proceeds along that exact same course, with devastating scene after devastating scene after devastating scene. 12 Years a Slave is a relentless assault on the human spirit and an exercise in emotional torment. Now, like any great movie, the most important element is the characters, so let's talk about them. Chiwetel Ejiofor plays Northup. The British actor who first came onto my radar with Serenity does incredible work here. Northup, despite being betrayed and beaten into submission for over a decade, somehow manages to maintain a small glimmer of hope throughout his entire ordeal. Ejiofor doesn't just play a guy who was born into these circumstances. He plays a man who knew what it was to be free for his entire life and then lost all of it. This isn't necessarily a physically demanding role, but the actor has to muster every ounce of willpower to portray a man who is well on his way to becoming completely and utterly broken. Ejiofor received a BAFTA award for his troubles, and it was richly deserved. A quick side note, Solomon Northup is given the slave name of Platt shortly after his kidnapping, but I will be referring to him by his free name during this review. During the sequence where Freeman sells Northup, the buyer is a man named William Prince Ford. British actor Benedict Cumberbatch plays the part as only he can. Ford is a complicated man, a preacher who's able to see the value in all human life while still being just as complicit as anyone else in keeping the slave trade alive. He treats his slaves better than most do, is willing to listen to their opinions, and appreciates Northup's skills as a musician. The audience desperately wants Ford to be better and do better. Over time, Ford will ultimately prove himself to be a fraud in spite of his good intentions. This character is both the idle coward and the useful idiot that slavery needs to flourish. One of the liberties that McQueen took with this adaptation was in handling this particular character. In Northup's exact words from the book, "There was never a more kind, noble, candid Christian man than William Ford." This is not me providing defense of the real man, but a simple piece of important context given the subject matter and Northup's opinion on it. Lupita Nyong'o is Patsy, a female slave who develops a close relationship with Northup over the course of his time in Louisiana. Patsy is favored by Master Edwin Epps for her nearly supernatural ability to pick 500 pounds of cotton per day. Epps is an important character to the story, and we'll get to him next. Nyong'o's performance here is absolute dynamite. Patsy's a simple woman, quietly keeping to herself and working hard in the fields to ensure her survival. As the frequent target of the Master's wrath, she endures the most unspeakable physical and emotional torture that we see on screen. In many ways, Patsy represents the loss of innocence that comes with being the property of another person. Nyong'o also received an Oscar for her portrayal of this character. Now, it's impossible to completely understand the story of 12 Years a Slave without talking about Michael Fassbender's character, Edwin Epps. Multiple people throughout the film describe Epps as a hard man, which is an apt description, but one that doesn't even come close to showing us just how monstrous this person really is. If Master Ford represents the gray areas of wanting to do the right thing, Master Epps represents the very worst of humanity at an already dark time. If you don't pick more cotton than yesterday, he whips you. If you look at him sideways, he beats you. If you say something he doesn't like, he'll chase you down and pummel you with his bare fists. Fassbender brings this vision to the screen with all the energy and fervor he can muster, and this is a performance that needs to be seen to be believed. Epps is a nightmare of a human being whose only solace comes from humiliating people, manipulating those around him, physically imposing his will, and burying himself at the very bottom of a bottle. You could call Epps the villain of the movie, but there's actually a lot more to it than just that. He's not simply a character that has to be defeated for the purpose of the story. He's an abhorrent, disgusting, violent, miserable excuse of a human being who represents an idea that must be destroyed. Epps is the very heart of slavery, a vile institution that the United States would eventually go to war with itself over in order to purge it from the earth. Like slavery itself, Edwin Epps is completely and utterly beyond redemption. Epps' relationship with Patsy gives us some of the most agonizing moments in the entire film. The way he lords his power over her actually dominates so much of the back half of the film that it occasionally overshadows Solomon's story altogether. This isn't a bad thing. On the contrary, it provides the viewer with additional depth and layers in truly understanding this horrific time. McQueen's prowess as a director is on full display here. The script, the sound design, the visuals, the camera work, the cinematography, all of it is carefully constructed to draw us into Solomon's world, a world that nobody alive today will ever even come close to understanding. You know what's probably one of the saddest things about 12 Years a Slave? This is nothing. You're looking at one man's life, and not even his entire life. This is a 12-year story condensed down into just over 2 hours, and the tale of Solomon Northup is one story among thousands upon thousands upon thousands of equally devastating stories to come out of the slavery era. How many more stories of suffering, sadness, and heartbreak are out there? How many other freed men and women were kidnapped and sold into slavery? How many were simply born into it and lived their entire lives that way? The movie does have a few side plots that discuss the greater meta-narrative around slavery, but nothing that draws us away from the main storyline. 12 Years a Slave is a focused, nuanced, honest, and brutal look at the darkest period of American history. It is also the portrait of a good man who was betrayed in the worst possible way, and a sad statement about what happens when we refuse to see the value in all human life. Thank you so much for checking out the review. If you like what you saw, click on that subscribe button. You can also like and share the video since that engagement really helps the channel grow. Please scroll down in the comments and let me know what you thought of 12 Years a Slave, and I will see you next time.